Okay, this is CAA number 3. We're going to start by talking about the National Defense Education Act of 1958. This law was passed after Sputnik was launched, showing the successful efforts of Soviet Union space exploration. As an effort to improve science, mathematics, and foreign language learning at the national level, this was launched. The United States realized that after this launch, the Soviet Union may be more educated in these fields, science, mathematics, and foreign language, thus making them more powerful. We aim to improve learning and take back control of space efforts. This encouraged further education beyond high school to current students. Next, we're going to talk about the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This was done in 1965. According to Crawford on page 106, it says, "It addressed the academic needs of poor children. This act has provided financial aid to support programs for English learners. The goal is to give English learners an equal opportunity to be successful in the classroom." According to Paul, he says, Lyndon B. Johnson passed this law and mandated funds for professional development, instructional materials, and resources to support educational programs and promotion of parental involvement. So in order for schools and learners to get these funds, it had to fall under one of these 4 categories. The next act is the Bilingual Education Act, signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson on January 2nd, 1968. This law committed the United States to assisting students with limited English skills. This law was an amendment to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1968, which we had talked about earlier. This act funded financial support to involve innovative bilingual programs in schools. This act is aimed to provide assistance to those with little financial means, just as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1968 was as well. The next court case we're actually going to talk about is the Brown versus Board of Education, ruled in 1954. It was heavily influenced by the Civil Rights Act when segregation was a big deal in schools. This ruled and stated that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. A young girl's father, Oliver Brown, sued the Topeka Board of Education when his daughter, Linda Brown, was not allowed to enter an all-white elementary school. Despite the separate but equal law, he claimed that the school she was attending was actually not as skilled or equal to the white school. Therefore, he felt that she had the privilege to attend this white school, even though she did not have white skin. Today's schools are still battling racial disputes considering sports, grades, and instruction for equal opportunities for all learners. The next court case is Plessy versus Ferguson, and this is what sparked separate but equal. This was ruled in 1896, much earlier than the rest of these. It talks about racially segregated public buildings being legal as long as the facilities for each are equal. So when we're talking about Brown versus Board of Education, this court case did not comply with that law because these 2 schools were not equal. Students of different races could attend their own separate schools as long as they were given the same opportunities for education and success. Segregation at this time was not seen as discrimination, however, it was seen as equality for the races. The next case we're going to talk about is Lau versus Nichols in 1970. This court decision was formed on the rights of language minority students. So any of these students not speaking English in America. This case involves a San Francisco poverty lawyer named Edward Steinman, and it happened when he learned that one of his clients' children was failing his classes because he could not understand the language that he was being taught in, which was English. Kenny Lau, the student, is who this case was defending. The school's officials responded that Lau was receiving treatment equal to all of the other students, and in this, they stated that it was more of a sink-or-swim mindset. He was being given the resources, but he was not responding to them. But in actuality, he did not understand his resources. He didn't understand what they were teaching him, what they were telling him, and so he didn't have the ability to succeed in school. It created evaluations of students with limited English skills to determine appropriate instruction. This involves testing and language skills. to make sure that students are where they need to be in instructional classes. The next act we're going to talk about is the Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974. This is also known as the EEOA. This act declared that no state shall deny educational opportunities to any individuals on account of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin. And this is by Crawford on page 127. All students are given equal opportunities to participate in educational programs. Different lawsuits that have come because of this act are the Castaneda versus Pickard court case, the Flores versus Arizona court case, and the Gomez versus Illinois State Board of Education court case. Counter lawsuits were made for the legal protection of English and for a unilingual America. And these are those who support that we should discriminate against those on account of race, color, sex, or national origin. The next court case we're going to talk about is the Meyer versus Nebraska court case. This occurred in 1923 and aimed to keep public schools teaching only English. This occurred when a parochial school teacher read a Bible story in German to a 10-year-old child. According to this law, it was ruled that those of another foreign language must be taught only English until they were able to read, write, and speak it fluently. Only then are students allowed to be taught another foreign language. This ruling was unlawful as children of English ancestry are prevented from learning a new language after mastering their own language. So it was actually hindering the English learners' language abilities because they could be exposed to other languages besides English. The next act we're going to discuss is the No Child Left Behind Act. This was actually come about in 2001. It is the most recent ruling of Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And this act has had many amendments throughout the years. About every 5 years it's been approved or amended to add to it. This is where funding was improved for children with financial needs for the improvement of education. So schools that showed that they needed improved financial needs were given this funding. It was signed into law by George W. Bush, who was president at the time, and schools were being held accountable for the success of all students. Schools who did not comply with the requirements of this act risked losing Title I funding, putting them at a loss for technology and teacher training programs. And their way of complying with these requirements is that schools had to do mandated testing, show that they were doing well on state-mandated tests, and show improvement in their students' knowledge throughout the school year. The next act is Cerna versus Portales Municipal Schools. This court case was in 1972. This case concerned a student, Jude Cerna, who was failed to be provided bilingual education by her school. She was a non-English speaker, and she needed those resources to help her get to where she could speak English, but they failed to provide her this. Jude Cerna was of Hispanic descent, and it was noted in this case that none of the teachers in the school were of Hispanic descent, nor did they speak Spanish. This significant case made education equal for bilingual learners. It also provided English learners protection against being discriminated for their race, name, or spoken language. So just because she spoke Spanish and came to this school not knowing English did not mean she could be turned away or not given the opportunity to learn just as all the other students in the school. And here are my references for this presentation. Thank you.